Welcome, everyone. My name is Carlie Brown. I am the Senior Human Resources Partner here at Inovalon, and I am joined by my amazing team member, Dr. Wilson Tam, and we are very excited to talk about leveraging your experience and building a career you're passionate about. So I want to take a moment to pass it over to Wilson to introduce himself today.
Thank you so much, Carlie, and please, Wilson. So my name is Wilson. I am the Director of Sales Engineering for our pharmacy business unit. So what that is I work with our sales team and in our sales team to help explain what our platform, ScriptMed Cloud, does for pharmacies, how it works, the intricacies behind it, and start to kind of build that value of like what our platform can bring to our customers. So spend a lot of time working with customers, spend a lot of time working with prospects, and really I get paid to talk about pharmacy all day, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome. Well, Wilson, excited to spend some time with you today to learn more about your career. I know that you have an amazing career journey. You started out as a practicing pharmacist and you transitioned to a healthcare technology team member here at Inovalon. I want to learn more about, and I would love for you to share more with our viewers today. What inspired that change and really those turning points in your career to transition over to technology from pharmacy? And then what are those challenges and life lessons you learned along the journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we were talking about this before we got started with our LinkedIn Live, but it almost happened very serendipitously. So I guess starting off in pharmacy school, I was probably what you would classify as a slacker. I went through pharmacy school because my parents, my uncle owned a pharmacy. My parents thought it'd be a good career for me to go into, and it's kind of resolved to just being a retail pharmacist, count by five, kind of working. In my mind, it didn't matter if I had great grades or bad grades. Either way, I was going to work in a pharmacy. And so, in so many ways, it was a means to an end for me. But I had one really good rotation at the New York Department of Health. And that kind of changed my perspective on, hey, there's more that I could do with my degree. And I feel like oftentimes it may happen in school, it may happen in our career, but there's this like kind of like watershed moment, kind of changing turning point in time where your own internal perspectives on what can be possible changes. And so long story short, I became inspired. I wanted to do more of my degree, and then I was like, okay, well, what else can I do? And so then I ended up working in medication therapy management, talking to patients about their medications. That transitioned into a role within specialty pharmacy. Within specialty pharmacy, I was always kind of interested in technology, and so that led me to serve as our clinical lead in building all of our patient management programs within the specialty pharmacy. So it's like an inspiration in college led to work that I was doing, working directly with patients, led to a specialty pharmacy career where I could build programming to help patients within that specialty pharmacy. And then that transitioned into a sales role that I had around pharmacy services after I left that specialty pharmacy. And then finally, it serendipitously happened, kind of each step along the way, but it happened with the Noblon where there was recruitment. And they asked me and said, "Hey, you have some pharmacy background, you have some scale, you have some sales experience. Like, would you be interested in this kind of role?" And that is when I started interviewing, started doing a little bit of research, and it turns out that ScriptMed Cloud, the Inovalon pharmacy kind of platform, is the same platform that I use in specialty pharmacy. So the same platform that I was in charge of configuring it, the same platform that I use to kind of like do all of our patient management work. Like that was that same company. And so then I decided to join the Inovalon team.
That's awesome. What a journey. And again, just each of those pieces of the puzzle really brings your expertise and your passion here today with us. What would you say the challenges were along that journey to get to where you're at today?
That's a great question. I think um, the number one challenge is, I think, and this is probably not even related to the industry, so to speak, but just kind of like finding like a core team within that company that you can be successful with. So when I joined that specialty pharmacy, it was like a core group of us. Another pharmacist, Farouk, actually works with Noblon today as well. But we traveled across around the country, opening up new sites, solving problems. Probably not the most helpful advice, but if you can find your tribe of people that you really care about and that you guys are passionate about the same kind of things and passionate about kind of accomplishing goals together, and then figuring out a way to be successful together, that happens. It doesn't always happen. I think it's rare to find. I've jumped in a few different roles before. You find it to kind of ride that as far as you can go, and then kind of transition that to different skills and opportunities that you might find in the future.
I was going to say that's interesting that that's your response because each of the pieces of information you've shared already have kind of showed that it's that intertwined uh, opportunity together to go along the way has really brought you to where you are today. There's a lot of unique skills and expertise as a pharmacist that you need to have. How do you find that those are transferable in the technology world? And what are kind of the gaps that you see there in those two areas of your career and through your transition?
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't I use an example for my own team, right? So, I'm always going to be looking for candidates potentially to add to my own team. And our role here, at least within the sales engineering department, is we work with prospects and or customers to understand the product and the feature and like all the value that it can bring. So what skills would I be looking for? I think successful sales engineers, at least for me, come from like one of two places. They either come from long institutional knowledge of ScriptMed and the platform, and like either you've been in support or you've like worked with the product on software side for a long time, so you know kind of the nuts and bolts of how everything works. Or if I'm going to be looking for an external hire, I'm going to be looking for someone with industry experience. I'm going to be looking for someone who has good public speaking or presentation skills. I'm going to be looking for someone who would have kind of like a good understanding of like how stuff kind of works. And that only comes from either working within the pharmacy or industry experience running teams within that pharmacy. And lastly, if you can find someone with script med experience, that would be a bonus on top. So the challenge is there aren't that many people who like meet all four, like who has industry experience, sales experience, software experience, like technology experience or operational experience. And to be able to like nail all four is going to be extremely rare. And my thought and thesis, and this might not be true, but if I'm having a hard time finding that like perfect match of skills, I'm sure there's someone with that perfect match of skills that's having a hard time finding that role as well. So like there's got to be it's going to be a process, and that's kind of a lot of what you do. Try to like find those two matches to make something like that happen, and then find that perfect role for that perfect person.
That's a really good segue into what do transferable skills look like? So, being a pharmacist and being in technology, there, what do those transferable skills look like? What are those skills that you had as a pharmacist, aside from the fact that you worked on the same platform, which is ScriptMed specialty? What are some of those that you see transition on the technology side that you took from your pharmacy side?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I would almost like flip it in reverse. It feels very much like a so side note, I've started becoming a little bit more active on LinkedIn, and there's like I would say primarily like two groups of people who are adding me, like people who are either trying to sell me stuff, which is always fascinating because I sell stuff too, and then a lot of pharmacy students or early pharmacy professionals who kind of ask that same question, like, okay, so all right, what do I need to get, or what skills do I need to acquire to find like a role like this or find something different beyond, kind of what's made available to me today. I would almost argue the opposite. I think you almost have to find what you enjoy and what you like. So for me, I had some technology experience, right? Like I knew how to like write a SQL statement. Like way back in the day, I'm gonna age myself a little bit. Like I knew how to put together a website. I knew how to use HTML and CSS back when that was the tools afforded to us. So that was like something that I was interested in. Another thing that I was interested in or was good at is I love solving puzzles in terms of, how does one piece fit with another piece, and if we change something here, what happens there, and kind of seeing how everything kind of connects together. And so, like both clinically and operationally, that was super helpful. And then as I got more comfortable in my career, I started realizing that I was actually a pretty good communicator. So, and that's something that I wouldn't say necessarily changed. It was something that was like I always had it, but it took a lot of years for me to develop the confidence to be able to use that skill. So that's what worked for me. That doesn't mean it's gonna work. It's not like a recipe that works for everyone. And I would say I would recommend like figure out kind of what you like and what you're good at, and then kind of follow that as hard as you can and focus on your strengths.
It's interesting you point that out. I always think about my career. And my career, I had different careers. I was in the finance industry, I was in the banking industry, I was in HR, and so on. And my main theme is always taking care of really good customer service, really good communication. And I was able to apply those skills in each area. It didn't mean that I needed to stay in one industry, but I was able to enhance customer experience, customer service, the end user of the customer, or and even a new hire orientation. The new hires that come through the company, they are my customer that I keep top level. So that skill ideally has transitioned through the years, and that is kind of where I find my niche. So it's interesting that you also have uh, those similar attributes that you were able to identify, that you were able to transition over to each of those areas as you transition through your career as journey as well. I
Okay.
do want to take a moment.
I take it
Oh
back.
yeah,
There is an answer here. There is an answer here. I think no matter where you go, and Carly, tell me if you feel the same way, but the ability to communicate and work with others and find ways to make them successful are going to be helpful no matter where you go, which is like probably not the answer that our audience is looking for. But if you can find success and help others find success, especially those even within your team or outside of your team, like that will always provide dividends for whatever you're doing.
I could not agree more. Clear communication is very important no matter what industry in or where you're planning to go. And I also always say, if you don't ask, you don't get. So it's really important across the board to no matter where you're going to transition your skills or what you're looking to do, don't ever feel that you can't make the ask, and don't be scared of a no. So very, very true. I can't agree more with you, Wilson. We do have a question from one of our viewers. How can professionals position themselves as valuable candidates in a new industry? Would love to hear from you, your thoughts around that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll give you an example of someone who reached out to me recently. She worked as a pharmacist within retail for a long time, and this is probably a story that's familiar to a lot of pharmacists. And we were talking about kind of some of the stuff I was doing. She's like, "Wow, it's like super interesting. I want to do that too." And I was like, "Okay, good start, right?" So I was like, "Okay, well, what do you like? What do you want to do, or what do you want to get into?" And she's like, "Oh, I don't know. It just sounds like what you're doing is really interesting." It is. But like, okay, well, like, what other skills do you have, or what do you like? And then she's like, "Oh, I don't know." I was like, "Okay." So then, well, what other background experience do you have that like might be unique? And then it was like, okay. if I was to give advice for kind of someone within that role or someone considering like a major career shift and change, is that there's probably one of two ways to go about it. You can just like quit your job and then just,
Yeah.
jump into it like feet first and then see where you land, which works for a lot of people. If you are much more risk averse like I am, I think what might make sense is going to or finding adjacent roles that someone might be passionate in. There's probably a lot of change happening there's a lot of change happening in healthcare in general, but even within pharmacy, there are a lot of like what I'll call more unique or niche kind of like pharmacy practices. So I think that specialty pharmacy has always been an avenue for someone who is interested in something more unique. I think compounding pharmacy is really starting to grow, especially as it continues to evolve. Oncology, if you look at the drug pipeline, there's more and more oncology products that are coming out. There's uh, lots of different avenues, probably more than I can name. And for me, if I think about my background and history, like I kind of lucked into MTM. I lucked into specialty, and I lucked into being able to be in charge of all of our patient management and clinical. So see if you can make a shift over to a place where you can get lucky, and then get some additional experience and find ways to excel in kind of whatever role is afforded to you that's outside of like scope of whatever you normally do.
I love it. There's also, I know here at Inovalon, we do stretch assignments, which I just think are so amazing. It gives you not only the opportunity, so if you're not risk adverse and you aren't ready just to shut the door and head on to your new position, there's often opportunities in your own existing career that you can expand those transferable skills or be able to find a path to the next steps in your career that are passionate, even maybe within your company, or that could help you grow in another area to find that new role or transition in another company as well. I want to pause for a moment. You mentioned change, and I know we have a very changing environment altogether. It's continually changing year over year in the different industries that we all reside in. And I want to see, how do you embrace change and how do you maneuver uncertainty with confidence in your current role or in your previous roles?
Yeah. So I think it's like almost like two questions there. One is the industry continues to evolve and change, and be uh, obviously you should be aware of a lot of those changes and how that evolves, and then what kind of impact and what kind of skills you can bring to that, and that could be its own LinkedIn Live session. And then I think the other one is your own personal change, and I talked about it a little bit briefly earlier. I think as I did more of it, I started to grow in my ability to communicate and or speak publicly. And so now, like I joke about it, but today, all I do is like talk about ScriptMed and talk about pharmacy for a living. And so to do that, that was a personal change and growth that I had, and then to be able to take some of that skill and then leverage it to what are evolving industries in specialty and infusion. That's how I kind of coupled those things together. And something that I would kind of tell the audience is like, I don't know that I did it with a ton of confidence. I think everyone, well, at least for me, not everyone, but we all have like imposter syndrome of like, oh, do I am I important enough to be on a LinkedIn Live? Does what I say even have any value beyond my small circle of friends? So I think that's doubt that almost everyone has, or I think that everyone has, and that you kind of have to a kind of overcome it yourself, and then b the more you do it, the more comfortable you get, and that you build those skills along the way, and then keep an eye and be cognizant of where kind of the industry is going.
I like it. I definitely think education, making sure that you're keeping up with your learning. What are those changes and what does that look like? Sometimes you can even just staying up to date of what's going on in the industry can kind of help with those aversions as change comes and keeping those top of mind. So appreciate your insight on that in the ever changing world and how to adapt to it. We do have another question from one of our viewers. Thank you, Carson. What skills from pharmacy have been most valuable in your tech career?
Skills from pharmacy. I think I touched on it a little bit. I think it's my ability to kind of see different pieces, both operationally and clinically, and then realize that, hey, if we change something here, how's that going to affect something else there? And then systematically run through how we can have, because in my experience, there's always going to be different stakeholders who always have different needs. This could be within the pharmacy, this could be customers or patients that we're working with that pharmacy. This could be pharmaceutical manufacturers that we're engaging with. All of it has to kind of jive and make sense. And, you know, what I would say my skill was like being able to understand, kind of see all those different pieces and be able to pull it through in some sort of systematic fashion so that we can build a process around it. That process-driven, systematic methodology of thinking, which I actually think a lot of pharmacists are really good at, was that kind of skill. And then, okay, well, now let's think about how we take technology and apply it and make it a little bit better and a little bit faster, or expand in our ability of like what we can provide. And I actually have a question for you, Carlie.
Yeah.
It's something that I can kind of verbalize and explain when talking to someone, but especially with all the change, I think healthcare technology is such a challenging industry. It's changing so fast, and there's so many different quote unquote solutions and options and things going out there. Like, how does a candidate paint that picture on their resume, or like what advice would you have for some of our people who are listening in? How would they even begin to approach some of that from your experience in HR?
I think technology, just again, staying up to date on what the technology is, making sure that when you're looking at the job description, that you're looking at those key points and really making sure that your resume reflects those skills. It doesn't have to always be in healthcare, in technology. Think about a time in your career that could correlate with some of the skills being asked for in the job description. That can be in an earlier entry level career. It can be projects you worked on in school. It could be an assignment that you worked on if it's looking more for an entry level position. What are those kind of key projects that could correlate? And all of us have tons of them across our career, even if we're entry level in our schooling, in our different entry level roles that we've been a part of. So I think just really taking those key points and trying to make sure that they're transferable and are finding those transferable points to be able to put on your resume and correlate them. Networking, I think, is a really big key also. And we were talking a little bit earlier about this. Networking is extremely important, in my opinion, to be able to have a very vast network that you keep in touch with, or even from a social and digital media perspective, to be able to reach out and leverage those connections. You never know who you're going to meet and who's going to hold your next opportunity. I know in my particular role, I had an amazing long-term friend of mine who remembered that I had really good customer experience and really good customer service skills and reached out to me while I was on maternity leave and said, "Hey, I think we have a position that your skills are really going to be phenomenal at." And here, 5 years ago almost, I'm now in my role where I have so much passion behind it. I love our name Inovalon, and that Nova is part of it, that bursting with energy. I know tons of us across the company have that passion and the energy that we work on and the projects we work on here at Inovalon. So I am in my role that I am extremely passionate about and that I love the work that I do. But it was all along the road, all along the way that I look back in my career and see that all of the skills that I picked up at each of my roles really landed me in the position that I am today. So those skills, definitely find those and be able to correlate those on your resume and find the jobs that really match those skills that you're most passionate about. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, networking's such like a funny thing because like whenever girls, oh, like yeah, you should go network out, and then like just meet like hundreds of people, and then like you'll find a job. It's
That's not-
tough. At least in my experience, like when I think of networking, I think of okay, I happen to land into a role where I could be successful. In that success, there are people who were like in the trenches with me, so to speak, to find that success. And as part of that success, I'm out there um, meeting other people and sharing kind of like what what I was doing and some of that, and then learning about what they were doing. So I think it's something cumulative that has to happen. So putting yourself in probably an uncomfortable position where you're doing something where you can achieve something, and then being able to share that either with the people who are in the trenches or whoever you help along the way. In my mind, that's like real networking because those are the people that you can call on, being like, "Hey, I'm looking for this," or "Hey, uh, I'm interested in this. Do you know anybody who would be able to help me with that?" And I would do the same for them. There's like a social capital that we develop together, and to me, that's what like real networking is. And I think that's probably the best way to look for a different opportunity these days. Just because I feel like and you tell me, there's probably roles open where you get like thousands of applications. Like how like it's so hard to stand out in that way. But if you have those kind of friendships and connections, that it can go a long way.
Definitely. And just surrounding yourself, follow those people who you are interested in their roles that you'd like to aspire or transition into. I know we only have just a few more moments. There is a question from the viewers. My son is going into pharmacy and actually interned at specialty pharmacy and now works in the hospital pharmacy setting. What advice would you give him in terms of growth and career path before we end today?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the pharmacy career is a very challenging one. I think there's a lot of you almost have to move out of just like a traditional pharmacy career to do something what I would like very interesting. Um, I would say if I was to give that advice, health systems today are looking into standing up their own specialty pharmacies, just because it's a much higher price point for the medications, and it's not something traditionally they've done. But there's a lot of growth. I also think depending on your role within specialty pharmacy, if you can get into that, there's just so many different avenues that can go from a clinical side, from an operational side, from helping even manage the technology side of that specialty pharmacy. So in summary, I would say try to get your foot in the door somewhere, and then try to look for something that suits your strengths, and just pursue it as hard as you can and try to be as successful as you can. And then um, continue to look for those different areas of growth.
Awesome. I appreciate that for sure. And I'm sure our viewer does as well, Wilson. Well, we are at times that whether you're looking to make a big career change or simply just take the next steps, this is your chance to take this actionable advice. And hopefully we inspired you today to take those next steps. And we are appreciate you joining us today. I don't know if you want to have any closing thoughts, Wilson.
Um, no closing thoughts. I think I'm extremely lucky in my career. I think along the way there were so many people that have helped me either directly or indirectly, that helped me develop my skills and skill set. And um, I almost feel like I don't have great advice for people because, like, all along the way, I've been so lucky with people who have helped me, and I kept finding roles that I could potentially be successful in. So, I guess my advice would be to try to do the same. It worked for me. I don't know if it'll work for everyone else, but try to find things that you're interested in, figure out who you are and what you're good at, and try to apply that to whatever you're doing, and then hopefully that success finds you as well.
Love it. Well, thanks for spending some time with us today. It was great learning more about you. And I had a wonderful time with you today. Thank you for everyone who joined us and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.